This video was brought to you by Henson Shaving. An end to Sudan's bloody civil war could be edging closer, with the long stalemate in the country being broken by a recent offensive by the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, against the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, in Sudan's capital of Khartoum and the nearby city of Omdurman. Given the scale of Sudan's humanitarian crisis, an end to the war cannot come soon enough. So in this video, we're going to take a look at why the near 2-year war may be at a turning point, and what might happen next for the people of Sudan. Could you rank every single politician in the world? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So, as with any video about Sudan, we should probably start with some context. We've done a number of videos about this conflict in the past, so you can check those out if you want some more background knowledge. But essentially, the TLDR is that back in 1989, a military coup brought Omar al-Bashir to power. Eventually, after a 30-year dictatorship, Bashir was ousted amid the 2019 Sudanese revolution, sparking hopes that the country would move towards civilian rule. Sudan did indeed begin a transition towards democracy, with a joint civilian-military council leading the way. However, this process was upended in October 2021, when the Sudanese military under General El-Fasher al-Burhan dissolved the government and seized power. The military carried out this coup alongside the RSF, a paramilitary group that had emerged from the Janjaweed, a predominantly Arab militia that in the 2000s were used by then-President Bashir to brutally suppress a rebellion by non-Arab groups in the Darfur region. In the wake of the October 2021 coup, Army Chief al-Burhan was in charge, while RSF leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, more commonly known as Hamedi, was his deputy. Tension grew between these two groups, though, and one of the final straws precipitating this conflict was dispute over plans to integrate the RSF into the regular armed forces. Eventually, on April 15, 2023, fighting erupted between the RSF and the Sudanese military, or SAF, beginning the civil war that persists nearly 2 years later. Fighting initially erupted in the capital of Khartoum's Tri-City area, but spread across the country, particularly to the Darfur region, where 4 of the 5 local capitals fell to the RSF in 2023. Towards the end of 2023, in what was described as a watershed moment, the RSF captured Wad Madani, the capital of the Jazeera state, an agricultural region known as something of a breadbasket for Sudan. Since then, a deadlock has persisted, with neither side making significant progress. Meanwhile, mediators from Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Africa struggled to advance peace talks and negotiations. And according to aid organizations, the war has created the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. Last year, we saw a beginning of a break in the deadlock, though, when the SAF in September launched massive offensives to retake key strategic locations across the country, marking a shift in momentum in the SAF's favor. So, what's the current battlefield situation? In early January, after several days of intense fighting in the Jazeera state, the SAF successfully retook the city of Wad Madani, which had previously been under the RSF's control for the past year. Over the weekend, the SAF further announced that it had secured all but one of the cities and towns in Jazeera, marking the SAF's most significant victory to date. The SAF soon advanced northward into Khartoum, targeting an oil refinery in Al-Jalilo, and then the SAF successfully retook their headquarters in Khartoum on January 25th, breaking a 21-month blockade by the RSF. Over the weekend, the SAF continued to make significant strides, regaining control of nearly all of Khartoum North. Should the army fully recapture the city, it would solidify its hold over the eastern bank of the Nile, while pushing the RSF to the west. This shift will present considerable challenges for the RSF, as the SAF now controls several key bridges spanning the Nile. As key strategic locations fall back into the hands of the SAF, many RSF paramilitary fighters have retreated to the western Darfur region, where they maintain significant control. Fighting has intensified too, particularly around El-Fasher, the capital of the North Darfur state, and the last stronghold of the SAF, which has been under siege by the RSF since last May. In response, the SAF has begun launching airstrikes against RSF positions in El-Fasher, while the Joint Darfur Force, composed of local armed groups allied with the army, has been engaged in battles against the RSF in areas of the north and east of the city. Control of El-Fasher is vital too, as it equates to command over the entire Darfur region, encompassing rich agricultural lands, livestock, and gold mines, the largest of which is currently controlled by the RSF's Hamedi. El-Fasher is also the gateway to Libya and Chad, where the RSF acquires arms, largely from the UAE. If the SAF succeeds in regaining control of El-Fasher, it would effectively sever a major supply route of arms for the RSF. But what actually accounts for these recent successes from the SAF? While regional support from Egypt, Qatar, and Iran certainly plays a role, another potential factor is the mobilization of young Sudanese democratic activists. For context, while the international community has often characterized the conflict as a struggle between two equally culpable factions, with accusations of heinous abuses on both sides, some grassroots organizations and civilians have taken up arms in support of the SAF. This shift occurs in a lesser of two evils context, where despite their previous opposition to any form of military rule, they now align to the SAF due to the perception of the RSF as a more significant danger to the country's state institutions and democratic prospects. Furthermore, the well-documented instances of RSF looting, murder, and accusations of genocide by the international community in Darfur have compelled many to side with the SAF, and their support has arguably given some sway to the army on the battleground. But as fighting rages on, the humanitarian crisis has worsened dramatically, something that's been exacerbated by US President Donald Trump's recent decision to close the US's international aid agency. As such, the death toll is rising, and indiscriminate attacks on civilians are increasing, as well as ethnically targeted ones, especially as the RSF seeks to consolidate its remaining control of the Darfur region. So, is the end of the war really in sight? And if so, what might happen next? Well, SAF's foreign ministry announced on Monday on the social media platform X that if the army succeeds in regaining complete control of the capital, the SAF will form a new technocratic wartime government, and called on RSF forces to lay down their arms and withdraw if they want to participate in the political dialogue. The SAF called on the international community, particularly the UN, African Union, and Arab League, to support this plan, as it, quote, represents a national consensus for restoring peace and stability in Sudan, and satisfying requirements of the democratic transition. But if the SAF aren't able to deliver a decisive victory, or the RSF refuses to lay down arms, it's still very possible that the conflict will slide into yet another stalemate, with two parallel administrations governing different parts of the country, akin to the situations in Libya and Yemen. Or worse, history could end up repeating itself, and the country may end up splitting apart once again. Now, it's not at all uncommon to really dislike shaving. In fact, lots of people actively don't like shaving. After all, it's expensive, with brands selling overpriced razor cartridges filled with useless technology. And even if you do pay for all of that stuff, you're often left with a bad experience: razor burn, ingrown hairs, and irritation. That's a problem that Henson Shaving have aimed to solve with their razor, one that's actively designed to protect your skin. In fact, Henson razors are better for three reasons. Firstly, Henson's AL13 razor, which they produce at their aerospace machine shop, holds blades at a perfect 30-degree angle, extending the blade only 0.0013 inches past the shave plane. That's less than the thickness of a human hair, and ensures that the blade is supported properly, unlike many other companies' blades, which in turn makes sure that you have a far better shave for your skin. Secondly, they're just cheaper. Those fancy blade cartridges are full of single-use junk, which makes each individual blade vastly more expensive than it has to be. Henson's razor takes totally standard blades, which cost just a few cents, which means that you can save money and can afford to replace your blades more often, so that you don't need to keep dragging a dull razor across your face just to try and get value out of that overpriced plastic. Speaking of plastic, those other cartridges certainly aren't good for the environment either, with 2 billion razor cartridges thrown away every year in the US alone. That's not true of Henson's blades though, which contain zero plastic, even in their packaging. If you want to try it out, then click the link in the description, add a razor and 100 blades to your cart, and then once you've done that, use our discount code TLDR at checkout, and you'll get all of those blades absolutely free. Using our link and our code also means that they know that you came from us, which really helps us out.